Isaac Hadjar and Gabriel Bortoleto are only separated by half a point going into the last round of the 2025 F2 season, and it might be a career-defining moment for at least one of the pair. Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. I'm Marcel and I'm here to discuss all things Formula 2 as well as all the other feeder series action from F1 Academy to the IWF, so let's not waste any more time. I will be trying a bit of a new thing this week, so I don't go into summary mode for too long. I have tried to limit myself to one summarizing sentence for every single series. So let's begin in F1 Academy, where a single dull race decided the fight at the front and the title when Abbie Pulling passed Meyerwerth for P2 off the line, while Dorian Parr went on to control the race. This sums it up quite nicely, I have to say, because unfortunately the second race has indeed been cancelled for barrier repairs, which is a bit of a shame, but I do hope they get around to just running a third one next week. At least that's how most of the F4 series have solved issues like this in the past. Instead, I want to focus on the real highlight this weekend, and that was, for my money, wildcard entry Alicia Polmovsky rising to the occasion with a very strong P5 on the road as sort of the midfield winner. So this very much keeps the excitement high for next season. Yes, this one is all but done now and there's not much happening in the title fight anymore, but really we have been talking about it a lot over the year. It's this next generation of F1 Academy drivers that really hooks us into this series more, if that makes sense. There's a flip side to this. As always, if we have really good drivers, there tends to be a lot of poor drivers as well, and one of these I unfortunately have to highlight is Bianca Bastamanti, with the big question of what has happened to her really, because she has had reasonably high expectations placed on her for her development going into the season. Now again, nobody saw her as like a title favorite or anything. I don't think anyone saw her as like a top 3 contender, but at least I heard her down, okay, she's one of the younger ones, she'll develop more than most of her opposition, hopefully, and I had her down as like one of the midfield wing contenders, if that makes sense. And instead, she has just been going backwards this year, really, with no scoring performances since the third round in Barcelona. So very disappointing. Here again, this time she spun herself out from P9, so it wasn't even on for an impressive result anyway, but she made it even more appalling. And truth be told, drivers like this should probably maybe be the end of the road for her racing driver dream. I don't think it will be, because luckily for her, she's got the social media presence to stay relevant, and hopefully she'll get a gig somewhere next year and prove that she is better than this. But I wanted to bring her up as one of the major disappointments of the year. We move on to our title story in F2, where the whole weekend can really be summed up with the title fight comes down to half a point between Hadjar and Bortoleto, while Paul Aron has finally found his maiden win with some penalty help ahead. Obvious, the title fight has to take the spotlight this week. Hadjar still, in my opinion, the more deserving champion after all the shit luck he has had to deal with in the first half of the season. But also, he did make another big mistake here, costing himself crucial points by spinning out from P2 down to, fortunately for him, only P4. So don't get me wrong, I am well aware that he is far from a complete driver. In fact, quite the opposite. But I still think he probably deserves this most, if that makes sense. Although then again, he is a second-year driver going up against a bunch of rookies at the front. That just always has to be said. Bortoleto, on the other hand, definitely looks like the one with the best form going into this last race. He's been absolutely clinical all weekend. Yes, he made a very costly mistake in the feature by pitting and then bailing again after passing the cone. That means you can't bail out anymore. So obviously very unfortunate. But I want to make this clear, that's not like a big driver error. This is not like spinning yourself out from P2. This is very much a split-second decision of a very rare scenario, and he just about made the wrong decision, cost himself the win. Unfortunate, but not to be compared with an actual like driver error. I personally still hope no matter how this title fight ends, Hadjar finds himself somehow in the V-Carb conversation for 2025, because to me it doesn't really make any sense that he has not been publicly considered for any seat despite fighting for the F2 title, whereas on the other hand, obviously Bortoleto is already locked into an F1 seat next year, so at least personally I really don't care too much whether he wins or loses. I'm just glad we'll see him in the big show next year. Nonetheless, if I had to make a prediction, I will just have to say Bortoleto will take it. As I said, he just looks absolutely clinical at the moment. But as always, I am happy to hear your opinions down in the comments. Next up, Rookie Watch, where we had 3 new debutants in the series. We've talked about it last week. Max Asserson and Kian Shields both turned up for the first time in F2. And I am kind of happy to report that neither of them did embarrass themselves, which at least for Kian Shields was half expected, but nothing really worth talking about either from either driver. Just a typical mid-season debut kind of thing. Dino Beganovic, on the other hand, has taken to the car immediately, which was quite nice to watch and really makes me optimistic that he can still turn his career. It sounds a bit mean to say turn his career around, obviously, but you know what I mean. His F3 has been rather disappointing. It feels like he is slowly slipping down the priority order in the Ferrari Academy camp, with Tarpanen and Kamara coming up the ranks. So this is at the very least a nice outlook for his 2025 campaign. Then I want to highlight Ollie Goethe for actually looking surprisingly good despite getting mecha chromed out of a P4 in the sprint. Typical F2 stuff, and a shame really for how expensive this series is to run. Either way, MP quietly fielding a rocket ship all season long, as shown by Colapinto, and Vachon cementing it with another sprint podium upon his return to the team. So I don't want to put too much stock into Goethe's performance, but let's just say it is better than I expected from his F2, not debut, but step up over the course of the year. And then last but not least, Paul Aron. I still stand by the fact that High-Tech looks absolutely rapid, and therefore it is a little difficult to accurately judge Aron given the fact that he doesn't have a proper teammate. But just to be transparent, it has been a while since Amaury Cordil has actually done anything particularly relevant. Like, it's been a while since he has randomly fluked his way into the podium conversation. So at the very least, it looks like High-Tech has probably cooled off a little. Therefore, I can now give even more credit to this Paul Aron win than I probably would have if he had gotten it like half a year ago. Fittingly, he has been picked up as the Alpine reserve driver for next year, which is a great destination for him, even though I am really baffled how Victor Martins did not end up getting that job, because for me it had his name written all over it. On to the big show in F1, where action can be summed up with more FIA shenanigans to keep us entertained despite a distinct lack of on-track action, and I personally find, unfortunately, this summed it up all too well. Lando Norris potentially costing himself and or McLaren in the championship by not lifting for a yellow was tough to watch, truth be told, but I want to highlight how apologetic he has been right afterwards, so at least that was quite nice to see. It very much feels like now that the championship is over, everybody can go back to being a little nicer in the media game, even though certainly not a constant thing throughout the weekend, as there have been quite a few meltdowns as well, obviously. The real highlight story, and I almost can't believe I'm saying this, it's Zhou Guanyu finally back in the points after exactly a year, not in terms of months, but his last time scoring was at Qatar last year. So good job there, and also crucially, it wasn't like a fluke or anything. He actually had to beat Bottas quite comprehensively to do so. So a very nice result at the tail end of his F1 career. Both Sauber drivers are really like the biggest question mark on the grid for my money, because technically both could be super deserving to stay in the series, but just didn't have a car to work with, or both could be in the conversation of worst drivers on the grid at the same time. And it is honestly almost impossible to tell with the information we have, the trajectory Bottas' career has been on before going there and everything, and the expectations for Zhou Guanyu. So I still don't know what to make of these drivers, and the fact that they're kicking them both at the same time, while it's great with the replacements they're bringing in, I think in general it's a little sad, because we will never actually get a proper answer to this question, I don't think. I do want to address one last thing about Bottas though, because this has been really winding me up on the social medias recently, and that is this Bottas to Red Bull rumor, fan conspiracy. I don't even know if it is a real rumor, but let's just get this straight. I love Valtteri Bottas. I think he's a really entertaining character and he had a really good stretch of a career in F1. But please, let's not forget what the narrative was like at the end of 2021. Well, Perez just helped Max secure his first title, where Bottas failed Mercedes in doing so and was, rightfully removed from the team as a result of this. Perez was a steady force in the midfield and he's been promoted to Red Bull, and up until more or less this year he's done a stellar job there. It's really weird what happened to him and it's difficult to tell, and obviously, we've gone back and forth with this, and I do agree that Perez probably needs to be removed now, but there is no real case to be made for Bottas being a reasonably or an expectedly better replacement by any stretch of the imagination. Again, the last time he's been in a situation like this with an even better car, I might add, he has struggled to do the very job that Perez is struggling to do now. So please, if any of you are on this Bottas to Red Bull hype train, let me know why, because I would really like to understand it. To me, it doesn't make any sense. One last story from the single-seater world. We did also have some action in Japan with the last round of SuperFormula Lights, where Sion Koide and Rikuta Kobayashi dominated the weekend for B-Max, while Toyota's Saito Nonaka fell flat, making sadly for an anticlimactic title fight. It was a B-Max 1-2 in the title at the end, as I said, Sion Koide with a convincing championship run to end things in terms of the points. But for my money, Nonaka got done a little dirty. I don't really know what happened this weekend. I didn't watch quali and I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know why he had to start from the very back in every single race. But either way, this meant that with the low passing potential on the track and with the cars, he never really had a fair shot at fighting for the title in this last round, it felt like. The big takeaway really is how closely matched most of this grid were over the course of the season. In particular, the aforementioned trio, as well as Tom's second man, Jin Nakamura. Nakamura and Kobayashi in particular were super strong as really the show stealers, considering both of them were rookies going up against teammates about 5 years older than them. So an excellent job there, and these are really the two names you should probably remember the most from this current SuperFormula Lights crop. On the flip side, it wasn't all super tight. It was a small grid, and there still have been a couple of ultra back markers that just seemingly had zero upside to them, Irayama being by far the worst contender in that regard. So it's not a perfect series, but certainly one that I think is overlooked way too often. Either way, that's it for the car racing side. Let's go to our karting report. I've teased it a few times. We had the last big international karting event of the year this weekend with the Miami Warriors Final, IWF for short, and really the last of our 4 World Championship / pseudo World Championship events. The whole weekend was massively affected by fog, cancelling many sessions across Friday and Saturday, making for slightly awkward finals at the end, but produced some proper entertaining kart racing nonetheless. As always, we begin in the mini category, where as always we had typical close mini racing until French champion Mani Nuvolini and Ludwig Ranquist could break away for the win, while young Czech star Zdeněk Babicek had to defend for his life to keep P3. For me personally, the big story is the breakout performance from French champion Nuvolini, because he did actually compete in the Euros in Miami, but made no big impression whatsoever. I actually had to check my notes to even confirm that, yes, I have indeed seen him race before, but I just didn't remember. So he certainly looked like a whole different driver this particular weekend. Babicek missed out on the historic double pseudo world titles he could have gotten after his Rotex win earlier in the year, but still another great weekend for him and really sort of the quiet star of the mini classes for me this year. One not so quiet mini star we also have talked about repeatedly is Nicolo Perico, and he was also here competing, but much like during Champions of the Future Academy, it's not the same as when he's running in the WSK competition, where here he is actually not a super duper front running force or anything. He was more an upper midfield kind of runner. Very solid, nothing to complain about, but just not the same dominant force we usually know and love him as. But we always have to keep in mind for these categories, he is on the younger side of these mini runners. It's just that when he's competing in the WSK, he still slots into the under 10 separated mini category. So he scored against, well, younger drivers effectively. Just keep this in mind. This does not mean that Perico is massively overrated or anything, I don't think. In the juniors, we had excellent action with Kenzo Craigie cementing himself as the emerging superstar in the juniors, repeating his FIA World Championship win with a fantastic display of racecraft. It really has to be said, Mercedes made the right choice there. Yes, James Anagnostiaitis is still a bit of a questionable young karting signing in my books, but Craigie has a unique quality to really rise to big occasions that'll be key when moving to car racing. He has also confirmed in an interview here that he will actually be stepping up to the seniors for next year. So again, should add to the spicy group of our Dries van Langendongs, Lewis Rowells and all the others that we talk about week in and week out. Should make for excellent racing. The British dominance in the One Make series has continued overall as well, with Zach Green and Aston Sharp also on the podium. British champ Harrison Mackie, who we've talked about a couple times, was also present. He was also really good, really fast especially, but too scrappy, and he actually took himself out at the end while trying to make a move for P3 or something. So a bit disappointing there, but still makes for 4 key British contenders with really few others in between. To give a bit of an outlook of the junior category itself, I wanted to highlight Dan Alleman for his really solid run in his first year in the class, just throughout the year and at the event in particular. Then also the Pinero Rusinol brothers or twins, I'm not entirely sure, but both of these are also just consistently improving every single month, it feels like, and it feels like a matter of time till they hit the top step of something big. And then I want to highlight Hagelen, the Dutch driver, who also had a massive breakout performance here. These all look like crucial names to watch in the juniors for the years to come. In the seniors, we had a lot of utter chaos all around, a lot of heavy hitters out early on, with Freddie Lloyd winning on track, but with a massive penalty after the fact, taking him way out of contention. Noah Wolf cutting half the track to take P2 on the road, and then Ruben Moyer ultimately inherited the win from the British pair with a perfectly timed late race charge. So truly an epic and entertaining senior race, albeit maybe a little more scrappy than one would hope for at this standard of racing. We did have more prominent young British karting stars here. Obviously Freddie Lloyd and Noah Wolf, but also Matthew Higgins, for example, were all consistent lead group runners, although Wolf in particular never really felt like a win contender, it has to be said. Scrappy outing from Freddie Lloyd, but again, Fast Freddy 2.0, as we can call him, is for my money still the most exciting prospect from this very crop. At least when we're only keeping it to British drivers, because really Thibaut Ramekes is the guy who ended his season, unfortunately fittingly, front running until roughed up and taken out later in the race. That's basically what his entire season has looked like. But he is in contention for the most exciting karting prospect to come out of this year if he ends up stepping up to F4 next year, as I would assume he does. And yes, he has no luck to speak of, but make no mistakes, this guy is absolutely rapid and a key player to watch in future Formula 4 series. Anyway, let's go on to our driver news. We have another couple of confirmations for next year's hotly contested seats. We begin in F3, where Theo Final has been confirmed to step up with Van Amersfoort Racing. This should be a very fitting seat for the man if and only if the team can provide the sort of machinery that Noël Léon had to work with this year. I do picture both of them on a very similar level, not front runners, not like emerging superstars or championship contenders, but certainly someone who on the right day for him could find himself on a podium, could find himself as like a semi-consistent top 5-ish contender. That's maybe asking a little too much, but you get my general feel. I do expect him to be on the level or similar to Noël Léon. We also have Javier Sagrera now confirmed to be stepping up to F3 with AIX. No huge surprise given the post-season tests. Is it a tiny bit of a shame that MP does favor Bruno Del Pino, so probably does favor Bruno Del Pino's cash over the financial backing of Javier Sagrera? Yes, a little bit. It does feel like, where is the meritocracy that racing isn't, but probably should be a little more? You know, disappointing from that particular angle. As a general move, I think it's perfectly fine. I don't think Sagrera is any sort of emerging star driver. I don't think Sagrera needs to be sitting in an MP Motorsports car. I don't think he's good enough to be fighting for regular points in F3 next year. So it's a decent end result, although I feel like he has maybe earned a little more than he has been given at the end. Onto the slightly slower cars, we have the confirmation that Pedro Claro will indeed be staying in FRECA with Van Amersfoort Racing. Now, this is a perfect move. I've said so at the end of the FRECA season. I think most of these Van Amersfoort drivers, except for Bortoleto, should stay for a second year because they've shown good raw pace, but a lot of maturing still left to do. So this feels like a perfect step, and maybe Pedro Claro can be a bit of a dark horse for the title. Again, if Van Amersfoort brings a similar package to what Bortoleto had to work with, I could maybe even see it happen. Now, I don't think he'll win the title. I think that's outrageous to predict, but maybe he can keep himself in the conversation for a lot longer than people would maybe expect. And then we have a couple of GB3 news to end on. First up, Alex Ninovic confirmed to be stepping up with Rodin. This is of a little surprise. Obviously, he's been the ace driver of Rodin in the British F4, runner-up in the championship, so a very deserved step up. I'm sure he'll do a fine job. I don't know if he can insert himself into the title debate, but again, we don't really know much of the GB3 grid yet, so I will reserve that judgment for later. Nonetheless, I am very happy for him. And then last but not least, we have Chiano Alazari also confirmed to be stepping up to GB3 with Hitech. This is probably the most surprising move of the bunch, just because I was, almost expecting him, just because I was basically just expecting him to stay with MP Motorsport, step up to FRECA, maybe to F3, but yeah, FRECA with MP seemed like the obvious step to make. I don't know about his financial situation, but just given the flag he runs under and the fact that he's got a brother in single-seaters, I figured money probably not a big issue. So why choose GB3? Interesting question, but I guess the answer might be he found himself a championship contending seat in GB3, which MP in FRECA most definitely would not have been. So I think he may have made a brilliant career choice there, and it really underlines this theme we've talked about many times over the course of the year. GB3 is growing and growing and growing in popularity, and there is no sign of stopping anytime soon. Anyway, as always, it's been a lot. These have been my thoughts to all the racing this weekend, but now it's your time to drop your thoughts down in the comments so we can get a little discussion going. And otherwise, I thank you all for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one.